Hi everyone. In this video, we will discover functions, strings and loops. When we need to make the same computation with different values, or when we want to simplify or organize our codes, we use functions. In order to handle textual data in Python, we utilize string objects. It's the first sequence type we will explore. For repeated execution of an instructions, loops are implemented. We will introduce for loops and while loops. Let's start with functions. Functions are introduced with the keyword def, followed by the name of the function and list of parameters within parentheses. As you observed in the previous video, colon in Python is followed by an intended block. Similarly, definition of a function line ends with colon. Then comes the intended block, which forms the body of the function. It's a good practice to add function documentation string called docstring in the first line of the body block. Then do some stuff, and at the end, using keyword return, it can return something. First example, a function that calculates the area of a circle. Def is the keyword declaring that you are defining a function. Area of a circle is the name of the function that takes one parameter called radius. We add a docstring. We make a computation and assign it to a local variable called area and return local variable area. Return statement is not compulsory in a function. You can simply print a greeting with a welcome function. You can define a function inside another function and call it inside your function. Here's my function, find maximum, and inside my function, I define another function. I create another function called compare, and once I define the function, I can use it inside my find maximum function. As you can see, I use it here, I call it here, I call it here. Last example, you can pass function as an argument. Here I have two functions, square and triangle. I define another function called total area, which takes as an argument function 1, function 2, and ABH, and it returns the sum of function 1a with parameter a and function 2 with parameters b and h. To call the total area function in the last line, I use the names of the functions I want to call, that is square and triangle, and with 3 more parameters. Now let's move on PyCharm and make some practice. I will not use Python console, I will use Python files. You can create a Python file in your project. You click on your project folder, right click, new, Python file, and then name your file. I already created some files. Let's start with the first example. I created a function called circumference of a circle with a parameter radius. There is a docstring. This function takes the radius as a parameter and returns the circumference of the circle. I compute radius times 2 times pi and assign to a local variable called result, and I return the local variable result. I want to print circumference of a circle with parameter 4. To run all of these codes, I hit the Run button and I have the answer 25.12. In the second example, increment ID function increments a global variable by 1 at every call. If you want to use a variable coming from outside of the scope of a function, you should explicitly declare that this variable is a global variable. In the first line of my code, I create a global variable called ID of student and assign 1 to it. And inside, in the body block of my increment ID function, before making any computation on ID of student, I declare that I will use a global variable called ID of student, and then I compute ID of student plus 1 and assign it to a variable called ID of student. And this function doesn't return anything. I call 2 times increment ID function, and at the end I want to print ID of student. I click on the Run button and ID of student is 3. Because at the very beginning it was 1, I called increment ID function once, it became 2, and I call increment ID function once again, it was 2, it became 3, and when I want to print ID of student, it prints 3. Third example, I have a function called find maximum with 3 parameters x, y, and z. And within my function, I define another function called compare, and it takes 2 arguments, a and b. And it returns true if a is strictly greater than b. It prints 2 numbers are equal if a is equal to b, and otherwise it returns false. And in my find maximum function, I call 3 times compare function I created inside my function. I want to print find maximum of 2, 9, 8 and 5, 2, 6. I hit the button and 9 is the maximum of 2, 9, 8. 6 is the maximum of 5 to 6. Fourth example. I created 4 functions. Each of them return their respective area. Square, circle, triangle, rectangle. And then I created 2 more functions. One parameter area, which takes as an argument a function name and the parameter a, and another function, 2 parameters area, it takes a function name as an argument and 2 more parameters a and b, and both returns function 1a and function 2ab. Then I want to calculate the total area of a square with a side 8 and a triangle with a base 10 and height 8. And similarly, I want to calculate the total area of a circle with a radius 5 and a rectangle with a side 5 and 3. And on the next line, I want to calculate the total area of a circle with a radius 5 and plus the area of a triangle with a base 9 and height 4. Or at the last line, I want to simply calculate the area of a circle with a radius 5. When I hit the run button, I have the corresponding results. Strings in Python can be created using single quotes, double quotes, or triple quoted. You can also create string objects from other objects using str constructor. Strings are sequences, so they can be subdivided. They are immutable, and string objects have their own methods. Strings are sequences, so we can use sequence objects operators with strings. Sequence items check. For example, A in arrow, it will return true. We can concatenate two sequences, pi plus ton, it will give me Python. Adding itself n times, 2 times pi will give me bye. Get the ith element. The zeroth element of arrow will return me a. Length of a sequence, len of arrow, it will give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I create a variable called myString and assign semiconductor to it. And for every element or every character of my variable, myString, I assign an index starting from 0 and I increment by 1. If I want to get 0th element of my string, it will give me s. I can make a string slicing. I want to get my string, but starting from the 0th element up to 4th element, and 4 is not included. 0, 1, 2, 3. It will return semi. Or my string starting from 7 and the end is 9. 7, 8, 9 is not included. I want to make a slicing with my string. Start parameter is 5, end parameter is 13. It will start here and goes up to the end. I have the same variable, but I didn't provide any value for the start, and in this case it starts from the beginning. Similarly, I may not provide a value for the end, and in this case it will goes up to the end of the sequence. I can also add the third parameter, which is the step. I start from index 2. I go up to 9, but 9 is not included, with the step 3. 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and then it will stop. So it will return MOU. If I don't provide start and end, it will return me the whole characters. There is another way of indexing a sequence object. Instead of starting from the beginning, you can start from the end and assign the last character index as -1 and decrement by 1 up to the beginning of the sequence. For example, I want to slice with negative integers. Start argument is -8, stop argument is -3, and it will give me 10 dakika. The arrow shows the sense of slicing. You can also slice in reverse order with two conditions. Start argument should be strictly greater than stop argument, and step argument should be a negative integer. For example, these two slicing gives the same result. My string for 1 -1 gives CIM, and similarly my string -9, -12, -1 gives CIM. And the arrow shows the sense of slicing. In order to execute codes several times, computer programming introduces loops. In Python, for loops are used to iterate over the elements of a sequence object. So, the body of the for loop is executed for each element of the sequence and exit when there is no more element. In order to make an iteration for a specific number of times, Python introduces range objects. For example, range 10 function gives you the opportunity of iterating over 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. For example, for I in range 10, print I will print every element of the sequence range 10. While loop is the second truth value testing structure we learned. While statement is used to execute the body of the code as long as the expression is true. For example, I create a variable called I, an integer object, and assign it 0. Another variable called myString, a string object, and assign it Colorado. Then, while I is strictly less than the length of my string, print the ith element of my string, and before going back, increment I by 1. To force to end a loop, you can also use the keyword break. Any for loop can be reformulated with while loop. However, the opposite is not always possible. Wrap up. Functions, a sequence object, and loops are sine qua non of computer programming. Functions are callable set of instructions that perform a specific task with or without parameters, and you can call a function as many times as you need. There are more to tell about functions. I will explain in algorithms and decorators. Strings are first sequence object we learned. They are immutable. We can call any sequence object operator with a string object, such as we can get every character of a string object separately. We can also slice a sequence object. We also introduce formatted string literals, in short F-strings. Loops are introduced to compute tasks several times with different values. In Python, we can make iteration over sequence object elements with for loop. Now, we will combine them to solve problems. Join me on the next video for tutorial.